we want to talk tight ends, Mark?
Yes, we should get to the tight ends. We're going to talk Iowa football, folks. Here we go. If anyone out there does not believe that this is tight end you, please include that in the chat and we'll be kind to you. But I'm just curious if there's anyone that has a defense for anyone else. And of course, the crowd is leaning black and gold, of course, but we know that we've got other fans here. So I'm just curious because I think we've arrived at a place when looking at the last 15 years to 20 years of college and NFL football that it's not debatable. So we will see here with Luke Lachey getting injured last year, catching about, only 10 passes for him as Addison Estrenga took over the starting position, caught 31 balls. Interesting number here. I'm a stats nerd. 6.2 yards per reception for Addison Estrenga. And I'm not faulting him for that. He caught the passes, but that is an extremely low figure in terms of downfield stretching the field at the tight end position, or really any yards per catch performance out of any offensive player. So we've got Luke Lachey, Addison Estrenga, Zach Ortworth. Who else would be in the mix in regards to those that could possibly see meaningful snaps?
Well, I'll be anxious to see what the progression for Grant Leeper looks like. Gavin Hoffman is as high of a recruit at tight end as we've seen in recent years. He's there early, so he's part of winter conditioning now and spring practice here starting in a couple of weeks. So those are guys I'm looking for. I got a lot of interest in watching what Grant Leeper does because I think, he's a former gray shirt kid who I thought was heavily under-recruited, had an opportunity to, I believe, walk on at Indiana, ends up getting a gray shirt to go to Iowa, is now on scholarship, physically looks the part, kind of like Estrenga did. Estrenga was like, I want to say he was not even top 1,200 nationally in the country, and he was playing as a freshman. And you're right, that yard per reception number is very low, but take into account the Iowa offense and quarterback play and play calling, all that. I mean, it wasn't an Addison Estrenga problem.
This makes me want to watch. Exactly. I'm not in any way dissing his performance. It just hit me because usually that number's in the 10 to 12 range for a tight end. And that makes me want to someday, when we've got the staff to do this, hey, Jimmy, go cut up all of Addison Estrenga's 31 receptions from last. I want to see all of them. I want to see those 31 plays.
I would love that. That'd be the kind of stuff people would eat alive here. If you had somebody that could just go through and just, if we break down players, we just play clips.
Yes. Based on what we just mentioned there. Man, it's strange. 6.2 yards per reception. Okay, let's roll them. 31 receptions. Let's take a look.
Yeah. He's Estrenga had a couple, I want to say it was it the, not Wisconsin game, might have been Minnesota, one of those games late in the year where he made a couple of really impressive catches along the sidelines. He got better as the year went on, and obviously he was thrust into a role where he was a much-needed outlet for a pass offense that really couldn't get anything going without Eric All and Luke Lachey. Receiver play was just, quite frankly, bad, and quarterback play was bad. So, no, I mean, I think that the list that Andy posted there in the chat, Lachey, Estrenga, Pascuzzi is a walk-on, but he's played a lot. Zach Ortworth was a freshman last year, played more than I expected, made a big play in a game on a go route. So yeah, those four guys I would think would figure in to the mix. I think when you and I talked yesterday about, what position where we're going to look at, one of my thoughts, not only about Gavin Hoffman, is how quickly does he get up to speed? Because we've seen tight ends like Sam Laporta, like Addison Estrenga play early in their careers, like TJ Hawkinson. But then my other question is, Michael Burt, really talented kid. I think he was very much like Grant Leeper, very under-recruited, had offers from like Minnesota and Nebraska and Illinois, some Big Ten schools, but a lot of FCS, FBS, FCS group of 5 offers, I should say. But he's going to be really good too. He doesn't get there until the summertime. He's at a Creighton Prep in Omaha. So he's another guy that I think will figure into the mix. I wonder what the future is like for Cale Vanderbush. And heard some speculation on that front, but he's a guy that came in, same class as Addison Estrenga. I'm not aware of him seeing the field. Maybe he's seen the field a little bit on special teams, but, now he's going into his third year. He's a redshirt sophomore, and at 6'4", 225, do we potentially see him at some point moving to a different position? I don't know. Remember, they also need to trim down the guys that are on scholarship to get back to the 85 limit. So, yeah, those are my question marks. I mean, they brought in Jalen Thompson. He's a redshirt freshman out of West Des Moines Dowling, who will be walking. Who's a walk-on on the roster. Andrew Lynch is another walk-on. They've had guys who have emerged. Hayden Large is still listed as a tight end, although he's a graduate and will be their fullback again. They've been playing less with the fullback, so maybe they get creative with him. They got plenty of guys who can earn that role. But Luke Lachey is going to be the guy. I mean, there's no question he's going to be, and he should be. I mean, it was a great start to the year before getting injured in 2023. And with Eric all gone, there's no question he's the guy. And, then you got Stringa and Ortworth and these guys learning behind him and see what the development's like for the other ones.
I threw the bait out there for a reason. D-Rock Irish, Tyler Eifert, Kyle Rudolph, Anthony Fasano, Dave Casper. We're going back to like 1970 with that one. Dave Casper's an all-time great, but still, we're stretching the years way out there. John Carlson, Mark Bavaro, some Notre Dame tight ends to the NFL. And D-Rock Irish, to be clear, you're not stating that necessarily to say that Notre Dame is tight end U. Maybe all time, that would be a great debate, but certainly Iowa's got it. But Notre Dame, top 5 all time. Question for you, Corey. So Luke Lachey, in sharing time with Sam Laporta and having that great combo in 2022, caught 28 balls, 398 yards, 14 yards per reception, 4 touchdowns. So from what you've seen out of Luke Lachey, is he as good as that legacy of tight end that we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years? Is he in that category?
I think so. Based on what I wasn't so sure of that before last year. What were his stats? I haven't looked at his stats through September of 2023 before he got hurt. Do you have those numbers?
10 passes, 131, no touchdowns.
And he got hurt in game 3. I think like before halftime of game 3. So, I mean, obviously volume was more, but he looked the part. I mean, he just looked extremely reliable. I doubt he had more than 2 or 3 drops during that stretch of time. And, Sam Laporta is another guy. We talked about the combine earlier for Logan Lee. Laporta is another guy who tested very well at the NFL combine, much to the surprise of some people. And I was surprised that Sam Laporta was not seen as a better draft prospect. And Mark, it's kind of like when we looked at the 7-5 prediction from Vegas on Iowa a year ago. And we were both like, okay, I guess these guys know more than we do, but this seems odd. And we were right. we were right on that, and they blew that away with 10 wins. Honestly, it was the same case with Sam Laporta and Jack Campbell, frankly. Like both those guys, I was like, hey, like Jack Campbell obviously was regarded slightly higher, but just the guy's work ethic, his physical stature, the production that we saw of Sam Laporta. I mean, from a volume standpoint, Sam put up some of the best numbers we've ever seen at a tight end heavy at any school, let alone Iowa. And so we'll see if Lachey can stay healthy. I think that's going to be the key coming off that lower leg injury. But no, I think he's got a chance to be really good. And he's, as far as size is concerned, he's listed at 6'6", 253. He looks the part physically. And, I don't know where I would have been curious to see where he would have been drafted had he left last year. Because remember, heading into the year, he was on a lot of preseason watch lists, kind of being projected as a top, at least 4 or 5 tight end nationally.
And if I remember correctly, Corey, the Zach Ortworth play, his 1 reception last year for 54 yards. If we listed, this would be another good May/June category to go through, let's say, the top 10 plays, the 10 most meaningful, impactful plays for Iowa football last year. But if I recall, they're playing at Camp Randall. They win the game eventually 15-6. So they win by 2 scores, but they're up by 1 score. They're buried deep in their own end, and they're about to have to punt. he makes the big play, 54 yards, gets him past midfield. They kick a field goal that extends it out to a 2-score lead. So that was one of the bigger plays in what was at the time the biggest game of the season.
Probably overlooked too because it ended in a field goal. Right? Like in general, there's a lot of plays that were like,
how do I
right?
say this without knocking Iowa?
No,
Isn't that
it's
apropos? Like if this was another
yeah.
team, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the block punt against Iowa State in 2022. They block a punt like first possession, first quarter of the game. I think it was first possession of the game for Iowa State. And, then Arlen Bruce has this end around where his feet come out from under him and he slips and falls and they have to settle for a field goal and end up losing the game. But that was an unbelievable play on the block punt. And you don't talk about it because it ended in a field goal and eventually a loss. Now they did win at Wisconsin. So you're right. And they had some big plays in the run game that propelled them. Remember, they ran the ball pretty well against that Badger defense that day. But yeah, I'll be anxious to see what he did. He was not a kid. I'll openly admit that. I'm happy to admit that I was probably wrong on that. Zach Ortworth was not somebody I had pegged as a guy who I expected to come in and compete right away. Addison Ostringa was just physically, his athleticism, his experience up at Sun Prairie, his hands, what he demonstrated on tape as it relates to route running. I didn't expect as much out of Cale Vanderbush, but again, these guys are being recruited with a view to development, and Iowa's, of course, been the best in the business at developing guys. TJ Hawkinson wasn't a real highly regarded kid. Neither was George Kittle or Sam Laporta. So I'll be anxious to see what Zach Ortworth looks like in year 2. And obviously this is one of the easier conversations we're going to have when we're looking at positions because, I mean, when's the last time Iowa has not had a strong tight end room? They were decimated by injury last year. Just unbelievably bad fortune to have 2 great players, probably your 2 best offensive players overall, go down with season-ending leg injuries. You just can't draw that stuff up. And then your quarterback also goes down as kind of the cherry on top. So that hurt, no question about it. And so when Kirk talks about, injuries hurting the offense, that's absolutely true. The injuries that they had last year at quarterback and the 2 tight end positions were arguably the worst injuries for Iowa to try to sustain. But part of the reason they were so devastating is because of the lack of development that has been had at with the rest of the offense, including backup quarterback positions, O-line, everything else, wide receiver. So they're very reliant on a quarterback that can get the tight end the ball and their best players being tight ends. And in spite of the tight end play, they still have put up miserable numbers offensively.
Exactly. And so I kind of chuckle when you say that because I completely agree with you. If somebody would have said in August, Cade McNamara is going to get hurt the second or third game of the season, something in that range, and they're going to lose their 2 tight ends, who, as you state, are probably the 2 best offensive players and weapons. Now we're going to look at their offensive stats. Do you think that they are skewed in any way? I would have said, well, absolutely. They lost those players, but it just kind of fell in line with their previous offensive performances. So it was kind of strange in that there's no excuse on one hand because that was the norm before that. But at the same time, we should offer some concession to you lose your starting quarterback, you lose your 2 best weapons.